Hello and welcome to a new style of video and playlist. As you've probably seen from the title, in this video I'm going to be answering some squash questions. Asking questions is a great way to learn, and in the past you would have asked your local coach or maybe the better players at the facility where you played. But now with the internet you can ask everybody in the world. So where do you ask? Well, I favour Reddit, specifically the squash subreddit. It's a great group of people with plenty of experience. But there's other places, for example Quora, which was specifically designed for asking and answering questions. There's also Facebook groups. There's a lot of popular squash groups, so you could go there, or if you've watched any videos on YouTube you could ask questions in the comment section. I'm sure there are others, but those seem the most popular. From now on, each month I will answer about 5 questions that I see posted on the internet, and I'll give my answers. For each question, I'll give you 1 or 2 key points for you to remember. No doubt there will be some repetition in the questions, but they'll often be asked from a different point of view, so that in itself can give you a different way of looking at something. Use the chapter headings in this video to jump to any questions that you find particularly interesting. There are timestamps in the text description as well, and at the end of the video will be a summary of the key points if you prefer to jump straight to that. All the links to the original questions can be found also in the text description, and if you find a question particularly interesting, I recommend following the link because you'll find other answers besides mine, and you might find those answers more suitable for you. And lastly, for future videos, I'll include more on-court footage to better demonstrate the points that I make. In this video, I'm going to be talking about squash balls, running shoes, racket and hill sprints, tennis-like serves, and after-contact movement. But before I start, you may have noticed these in the background. These are the HECS ball, invented by Dan from Canada. They were or are designed to be used by badminton players for them to practice their skills pretty much anywhere there's a wall. Now, of course, that could be useful for squash. And Pierre from Squash Source, who, by the way, you really should check out his channel. He should have a lot more subscribers than he does, has tested them, and a reader contacted me and said, hey, look, what do you think about them? And I said, I don't really know. They seem like a good idea. So I contacted Dan, the creator, and he kindly sent me these, and I'll be producing a full review using a squash racket instead of a badminton racket, and full review will be coming soon. The link to their site is in the text description, so I highly recommend going checking those out. The first video is about squash balls, and if you want to read the text properly, pause the video now. There are a couple of things going on with this particular question, and the first one is the fact that the person has been using squash balls that are very old, potentially years old. Now, a squash ball loses its bounce consistency after about 5 hours. It depends on the court conditions, it depends on how hard they've been hitting it depends on how old the ball is before you start using it, because that can be important as well. But basically, after about 5 hours, the ball's not the same. And more importantly is that it gets like a covering on the surface. It looks shiny, and that can cause the ball to skid. So you don't want to do that. You want to be using new balls if possible. Now, you can put your ball in the washing machine at 30 degrees with your sports clothes, and that can help for a few more games, but ultimately it's only a temporary measure. You can't keep doing that and keep having brand new balls. So the first key point here is don't play with very old squash balls. Try to buy new ones if you can. Secondly, he mentions that he can't get the ball out of the back corner and often has to play a recovery post. Now, that's a clear indication that either the serve is absolutely brilliant, or more likely he's not confident or skillful enough to take the ball on the volley. Now, it's easy for me to stand here and say take the ball on the volley, but I know it's much harder. But you have a short swing, you keep your wrist firm, and you block the ball and you aim high. Use the speed that the server has hit the ball to get the ball back. I often see people really trying to hit the ball hard, thinking that they have to return it with more power than it comes to them. You don't. You just have to stop it from getting in the corner, and you have to get them off the tee. So the second key point is to block that serve before it gets into the corner. And the last thing he mentions is the fact that he's been using a double yellow dot since he started, and I really get frustrated when I hear that. It's not the person's fault, it's the way squash has been promoting the ball, but that's another issue. If you can't get a double yellow dot very, very hot, use a single yellow or even a red dot. Don't be a ball snob. Don't use a double yellow just because the better players do. Squash is way much more fun when the ball is bouncy. And here is another question saying exactly the same thing, that once they switched to a red dot, they had so much more fun. Red dots are perfect for beginners and improvers and even good players under the right circumstances. So the key point there is use the right ball. There's a link in the description to my Use the Right Ball guide, and I highly recommend you visit it if you don't know which ball you should be playing with. Question 2 is about running shoes, and again, pause the video if you want to read the question properly. Now, even without searching for those particular running shoes, I knew the answer to the question. Yes, they will harm you. Maybe not today, or tomorrow, or next week, but eventually you will have a problem wearing those shoes. Running shoes provide no support for twisting and turning, especially for dragging. They have a raised heel, which means you are likely to twist your ankle, and they don't have the right sole for a squash court. You will often mark the squash court, so you're probably, or almost definitely, breaking the club rules. Now the problem is we don't know what shoes this person had before, and whilst the running shoes might have felt better than the shoes they were wearing, they almost certainly won't feel better than a pair of proper squash shoes. You could use badminton shoes, handball shoes, or any other type of indoor court shoes, but squash shoes are the best for squash because they're generally harder on the top because people drag their feet. So don't use running shoes on a squash court. So the key point, use the right shoes. Question number 3 is about rackets and hill sprints. Again, pause the video if you want to read the question carefully. So, in response to the first part of this question, which was about rackets, do they really make a lot of difference? Well, the answer is that a racket is a tool just like any other. Give me the best pencil in the world, and I still struggle to draw really good stickmen. And give the perfect racket to a player, they won't be able to play well unless they have the skills to use it. Now, whilst I totally believe and agree with what I've just said, there is also a psychological component to this particular issue. When we've got a new racket, or when we've got a racket that feels right, it doesn't matter whether I'm holding a wooden racket or not, what matters is that when we pick up a racket that feels great, we feel great, and if we start to hit the ball and it feels easier, fantastic. But the gain that you make the first few times that you play are short-lived. You're not going to keep getting better, but you can keep getting better if you improve your skills. So, I've got no problem with you buying new rackets, although I would just recommend trying as many different rackets as possible. But the chances are that you could improve your squash skills more than you will be able to improve just by buying a new racket. But the reality is that it's just easy, isn't it? We just put a little bit of money down on the table, we get a new racket, and we've improved. But have we? No, we haven't. We just feel like that we're hitting the ball better. And of course, jumping from this to a modern racket, yes, that would be a huge difference. But most modern rackets, the difference between a few years, it's not a big difference. So all I'm trying to convince you to do is, instead of worrying about your rackets, think about your skill. Work on those, because those will give you the lasting benefits. Now, the second part was to do with hill sprints, and this particular person wanted to do hill sprints. He said that, or she said that, they didn't feel that this was an area that was limiting them, but they wanted to do this kind of explosive type workout. Now, the problem is that we often get an idea in our head, and I'm guessing, but this person maybe enjoys those kind of workouts. I know that I did. And as a coach, I'm constantly looking for ways to get a player to work on the things that they need to work on. I want them to work on their weaknesses. I don't want a player with so really high fitness but then can't control a ball. And I obviously don't want a player who can control a ball like me and has no fitness, me. Obviously I'm looking for this. But if you're going to be doing things that are taking one side up, it's not going to be bringing the other one with it. Try to balance that. So what I'm talking about is try to be objective. Look at what your game needs and work on that. And I think in this particular case, the person just wanted somebody to agree with them and to say, yeah, go and do your hill sprints, thinking that, that's all they needed. But maybe it was, but I don't think so. I think that more often than not, we could improve our movement or we could improve our racket control, and those things will bring better benefits to our game. So that last point is, the key point there is, do the things that you need to do, not the things that you like doing. Question 4 is about a tennis serve. Pause the video if you want to watch it. Now this question comes up quite a lot. Are you allowed to serve like a tennis player? Well, the answer is yes, you can if you want to. But there are 2 buts. Number 1 but is, unlike tennis, you must have at least 1 foot on the ground when you make contact with the ball. In tennis, you can jump. The higher you are in tennis, the better the angle. But in squash, it makes no difference, which is the second but. Even if you serve like a tennis serve against a better player or against not a beginner, they will just block the serve. And even if they don't, the fact that you're making contact so high, even if the ball bounces just past the short line, it's going to go upwards. It's not going to get into the corner. So the key point here is, don't bother with the tennis serve. You'll only waste your effort. Serve like a proper squash player, and try to get the ball into the corner without the opponent volleying it. And a tennis serve just doesn't do that. And here we are with the last question. Pause the video if you want to read it carefully. Now, the situation was to do with the rules. Basically, a player was hitting the ball, getting themselves caught against the side wall. There was the ball, there was their opponent. Should I move back to try and keep out of the way? Or if I stay here, is it dangerous? I can't do anything. And the reality of the situation is that you have hit a weak shot. You have to suffer the consequences. By moving, trying to get back to the tee, you'll cause more interference and you might even be dangerous, or you might get a stroke called against you. Remember, a stroke would be where the person can't even hit the ball. But at least by standing against the side wall, when the person hits it, as long as they don't hit it at you, you've got a chance to get it. But it was clear to me from the wording of this particular question that it was more about what was happening as the ball was being hit and the movement afterwards. Now, the person said that it often happened when they were tired. And what was happening was, as they were getting to the ball, they were moving forward as they were hitting it because they were tired. Now, it's very easy for me to stand in the squash room and say, you should take a longer last step, you should get lower, and you should reach more. But that is the solution. And if you didn't know what the solution was, you couldn't stop it from happening. Yes, it will take a little bit of work on your legs and you'll need to get a little bit stronger. But if you can do that, you won't find yourself between the against the wall and then the ball and then your opponent. It should be that you hit the ball, you come back, and then your opponent comes in front of you, you move to the tee, and you've got a chance to keep going. So the key point there is, don't hit and move forward afterwards. Stay low and reach more. Alright, so here is the key point summary. I'm going to read from my tablet because I have such a terrible memory. Question number 1, the key points were, don't keep and play with old balls. Try and buy new ones if you can afford it. 2, volley serves with a solid swing and firm wrist and aim high. And then number 3, use the right ball. Don't forget there's a link to my guide in the text description. Squash should be fun. The bouncier the ball, the better. If you can't get a double yellow dot, very, very hot, it's the wrong ball for you. Question number 2, the key point was don't wear shoes that are not specifically designed for indoor courts, preferably squash shoes. Never use running shoes. Key point number 3 was buying the best racket for you doesn't make you the best player. Learn skills by practicing or having coaching or watching videos or whatever it is, rather than thinking that the quick solution is a new racket. But keep trying as many different rackets as you can, because when we do find a racket that we like, it really does make us feel good. And the second part of that point was fitness is very important for squash, but it's better for you to do the things that you need to do, not just the things that you like doing. Point number 4 is don't serve like a tennis player. It doesn't give you any benefit. Serve like a squash player. Get the ball into the corner if you can. And then the final point was to do with the movement. Instead of running after you've hit the ball, get lower, lunge and reach if you can. Okay, well there you go. I hope you like this new style of video. Remember, the links to all of the actual original questions are in the text description, as well as a link to the HECS ball and Pierre's Squash Sauce channel. You should go check all of those things out. If you've got any questions, please post them in the comments. And of course, remember, do something every single day to improve your squash. See ya.